So you were 10 at that point, and by the time you were 10, had Hitler become the dictator yet, or was he still the chancellor?
No, he became a dictator by he became a dictator very shortly. I mean, you know, we're not talking about years. I mean, he was a dictator from beginning to end.
Were people aware of his climb through the government, or was it something that was kind of kept under wraps? Was it something that people knew about? Like, was it just like one day he was chancellor, then one day he declared himself dictator, or was it something that was?
Well, I mean, he didn't declare himself dictator. I mean, he was the his official title remains the chancellor. He was the chancellor of Germany, as far as that's concerned. But I mean, he was a ruthless dictator as far as running the country is concerned. In other words, any organizations we had, like the Reichstag, somewhat, I guess, similar to our House of Representatives, that was strictly all orchestrated the way he wanted it. I mean, there was no debate about anything.
It was just what he wanted.
But he would, you know, he would give speeches, sometimes 2 and 3 hours long, addressing the like the Reichstag, which in turn then over the radio went to the whole nation. But he had absolute control of the country.
So growing up and being a part of
And the only way he could achieve that is, like I told you in the beginning, is by basically by making it a police state, that everything was watched, everything was recorded. I mean, from little things on, you could not put anything in the mail that didn't have a return address on it. So they could always determine who was writing, who was doing what. I mean, from little things like that, every housing every district was divided into sub-districts and had a black warden who went around and talked to the people and told them whatever the government wanted them to do, you know. And he came to our house one time, I remember, to discuss with my parents that they should have another child, because Hitler very much wanted the birth rate increase, because he needed he needed soldiers for the future. That's all. That's what it was all about. And the woman that had 4 children got a decoration. You know, she wore around her neck or whatever it was, or on her pocket. And so the black warden came. Tried to tell my parents, you know, that really it was their duty to create another child, you know. And of course, that didn't go over very well. And I was witness to that, because I was sitting on the steps leading in our house, going upstairs, about 10 steps up. You couldn't see me from the side anymore, and I was sitting up there listening to the conversation that was taking place downstairs. You know, you could not travel. You had to report to the police wherever you went. You had to go to the police when you got there. and report where you came from and how long you were going to be there, including when you went on vacation, you know, a harmless summer vacation. We used to go 2 or 3 weeks to the beach, and well, the first thing we had to do was to go by the courthouse and report that we had arrived, because it was so arranged that whoever, whether you slept in whether you stayed in a hotel or in a private home, it was the additional responsibility of the hotel or the private home to report that you had arrived and that you were staying there, you know. I mean, it was total control.
Mm-hmm. The police state that you referred to
Yes,
earlier.
yes.
Wow. So, growing up, being part of the Hitler Youth, did you ever see Hitler speak in Berlin?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, I particularly saw him in a bunch of holiday parades when he was going from one place to another, and we as the Hitler Youth had to line the streets.
Oh, wow. Wow. And he was a very charismatic person, from what I understand. Was that what your perception of him, or?
Yeah, I mean, he had to have that ability to have done what he did.
Mm-hmm.
He undoubtedly was mentally deranged to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, and you see what he did, if we compare it to today, we should be building infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he was doing. He built infrastructure, he put the people back to work. Or in the beginning, but he always knew why he was doing it. He wasn't really doing it to put the people back to work.
Mm-hmm.
That was the result that he liked, undoubtedly. But he did it to build the autobahns, which later on transported his troops
Mm-hmm.
into France and into Russia and wherever he wanted to start a war.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately, you see, from the peace treaty, from the Versailles Treaty from the First World War, which limited the arms that Germany could have, he disregarded all of that, and he put the people to work. Yeah, building tanks and guns and ammunition and streets, and you know, for him to be able later on to do what he did.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you were 10 as a Hitler Youth. So how old were you when World War II started?
Well, the question is, number one, when did World War II start? You know.
Right.
So
in 1931.
Well, we
Japan
had
invaded.
the various invasions. I mean, you know, the first thing he did, and I can't even give you the exact dates because I'm not that good on it. I got it all in the bookshelves. You can look it up. But he took. The first thing he did, and I'm sure my memory is correct, he took back everything that was taken away from us and given to France,
And the Treaty
which
of
was
Versailles.
the Ruhr and the Rhineland,
Mm-hmm.
which was heavy industry,
Mm-hmm.
particularly steel industry. That's the first thing he did.
Mm-hmm.
And the Allies let him do it and said, well, okay, but no more,
Right.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing he did, he went into I think Czechoslovakia came next, but it might be that Austria came next. And the Austrians, you know, they will tell you today that they never liked Adolf Hitler, but they were jubilant when he took Austria over, and they were very happy to be called part of the Great Germany. They deny it today, but that's the way it was. And then we went into Czechoslovakia, and there again we didn't start out taking all of Czechoslovakia, and that did come before Austria, the first part. We just went in and took what was a border country, so to speak, I mean, which had been heavily populated by Germans. And I think the border had been moved over the pass several times. That's the next thing he took, yeah. Then, you know, came Austria, then he took Czechoslovakia, and then he went into Poland. But he made a deal with the Russians. The Russians agreed that they would just divide Poland. You know. And he had a non-aggression agreement with Russia, which we had now two ideologies, Nazism and communism, that you know, really didn't have no way of ever getting along with each other.
Right.
But being till he broke that agreement. So where do we want to start the war? You know, I mean, that's the question.
It's debatable.
Yeah, it's debatable, but I mean, you know, when we heavily got into the war, I think you would have to say when we went into Poland, probably. You know, the rest of the things were things that the Allies, and when I say the Allies, particularly the British agreed to, you know, because Britain was the European power, other than Germany and France. And so Britain agreed, and France agreed. Well, the official declaration of war, I guess, was when we marched into France. Well, anyway.
And that year was?
Yeah, actually, I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
If you ask me those things, I have a little more time to think about it. I probably can't even put some good dates on there. But
Well, that's okay.
anyway,
Early 40s.
Well, no.
No, it was before that.
No, 40s we were heavily into it, honestly. So, you know, 39,
Late 30s.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So the war starting, when that actually happened, was debatable, invading Poland and France. And then at what point were you drafted into the Navy?
Well,
And how old were you?
okay. The Germany, before Hitler, was in the draft, was very much like you have the draft here now.
We don't
You know, well, we did have it till
Yeah.
in the last war, didn't we? And you registered when you were 18 years old, something like that. Well, now we are in Hitler's time. Soldiers are needed badly. So when I got to be 16 years old, I had to be in the service because we were needed. So they took whole school classes and put them into in my case and in the Pope's case too. We we both got into an anti-aircraft battery, all right? And we would actually man the guns, and particularly run the equipment that it took to determine where the plane was. I mean, you listen to it, and you watch them visually, and then of course you fired at them. So if we had to be up all night, which pretty much was a regular deal by then. And let's see now, time-wise now, I'm 16 years old, so we are 1943, all right, so in the heights of the war. That the teachers would be nice enough to let us sleep whenever we were supposed to have classes, so our education was somewhat pretty much affected.
So you were fighting, but then going to school too?
Yeah, we lived in the batteries. We lived in barracks in the batteries, and the barracks had a big mess hall, which they made a school, they made a classroom out of it.
Oh.
And during the day, we were supposed to have classes.
Wow.
And of course, if there was an attack, then, we dropped everything and ran for the guns.
Wow.
But at that time, most of the attacks were at night, because the Americans at that time would attack at night and not during the day. That's another story. I got some good books on that, by the way. But anyway, so now came the question, what to do. Well, the first thing was, if you did not volunteer for the service, you were drafted, and you were drafted, I think at that point, when you were 17 years old, and you went as a regular soldier to wherever the government decided they needed you. Or you could volunteer to be an officer, in which case it took you were drafted too in a way, but I mean, you then went to officer school. So you might say you got at least 6 months of easy living before you had to face any real war. And so of course we could, since we went to high school. I don't know how it is. I get confused over here now. Everybody has to go till they're 18 years old, right?
Well, it depends on when you start.
Okay, you still get out at 16?
No, I mean, you can.
Well, that's the time we're talking about in Germany. You could get out when you were 14 years old.
Oh.
You could get out when you were 16 years old. The 14-year, get out at 14, you had plain grammar school. At 16, you had an elevated education. And high school, which I went to, you normally would have stayed until 18. But in 1943, he didn't have enough soldiers anymore, so we had to. As a matter of fact, I was 16 years old when I went into that anti-aircraft battery, and I had only been there about 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 weeks when the bomb hit us, and 6 of my classmates died. But then, I volunteered, and I volunteered to be a naval officer. As a matter of fact, I volunteered to be a naval doctor and was accepted. And when I was drafted, I still went in with the idea of becoming a naval doctor, which was a really good deal because you studied in uniform, and in between your 4 or 5 years of studying, you always had a 6 months period in there where you had to actively serve. And you got promoted along with it. So when you got out of college, you were a lieutenant, and at the same time, you were a doctor. You know. But of course, that as we went into the last year of the war, I was reassigned as a naval, what I don't even remember. But anyway, the idea of becoming a doctor was not valid anymore.
Right.
So I don't know whether that answers your question or not, but
Yes, definitely.
okay.
So your original plan was to volunteer to be a naval doctor and get your education and then do the 6 months in between of service, but that their priorities changed, I suppose, when you were reassigned,
Yeah.
and that wasn't a priority. So what was your actual job assignment in the Navy?
Pardon me?
What was your actual job assignment in the Navy? What was your
Well, I ended up in a coastal battery near Wilhelmshaven, which is in the north of Germany at the North Sea. And a coastal battery was basically a battery protecting a harbor. In other words, the guns could shoot one way towards the water for the ships coming up. I mean, they were the only thought they ever had that the coastal battery could do. Well, we managed to turn those guns around so we could shoot inland. And my final assignment was to direct the fire from the battery onto the coming British troops from the top of a windmill.
Wow.
So I had one sailor that reported to me, and we set up our radio equipment on the very top of the windmill. And then we were supposed to direct the fire, like I said. Now we could hear the tanks rumble. And I'm not sure how far you can hear that, but I always was under the impression that they were about 20 miles away, coming towards us. And
you could hear them from that far?
Well, no, that was too early. We were supposed to wait till they came closer. And so there was nothing going on, so to speak. And we decided, in all fairness, to be half good German. we would smash the broadcasting equipment and get the hell out of that windmill, because we knew they would zero in on us.
Right.
And so, if you can imagine a dark night, sitting on top of a windmill, sit top of the windmill, and we had the radio on, and all of a sudden, it started to funeral music, and heavy Wagner, particularly Wagner, was played, and then lo and behold, an announcement came on that Hitler was dead. And when that night, that day when he killed himself earlier in the day. The news didn't come out till a little later and was on the radio. I was sitting on top of that windmill. And we got the hell out of there and went back to the battery, you know. I mean, as far as we were concerned, the war was over.
But didn't you get captured after that?
Well, I mean, yeah, but now we're getting into so many stories, you know.
So, in
That's really not what she is after. So
Yeah.
so when Hitler died, as far as you guys were concerned, that was it. The war was done.
Well, the war was over in effect with his death,
Right.
for all practical purposes.
Mhm.
There was still some resistance,
Mhm.
and there was still a little fighting going on. But basically, you know, nobody wanted to fight.
Mhm. Okay. Let's see. Wow, this is good stuff. So the windmill was your last night, and from there, where did you go after that night on the windmill? When you found out Hitler died, where did you?
We
go
went
from
back to the battery
Mhm.
and thought about the situation. And while we were thinking, a lone British soldier on a motorcycle rode into the battery and told the commander that that there was supposed to be no fighting, and everybody was supposed to stay in place where they were till they would get further word from the British. In the northwestern part of Germany is where the British marched across Germany. I mean, they came through the Netherlands and then through the northern part of Germany. And so that soldier told us, you know, then in turn, our guy told everybody, you know, everybody stay. So then my buddy, who had been in the windmill with me, we stole 2 bicycles and decided to see if we could ride home, basically to Berlin.
Did you make it?
No, we didn't get very far.
Oh.
But before we didn't get very far, we managed to exchange the 2 bicycles for a horse and a carriage. And we thought we were really doing well by then. But unfortunately, they had cordoned off the entire area. I mean, you know, and an area as big as Forsyth County or Guilford County, which had waterways, 2 ways, and a big canal on one side. And they just put machine guns all around the area and put all the troops there. And we stayed there for about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, till then the British were ready to come in and start made a regular prisoner of war camp out of it.
Okay.
And that's when I was officially released from by the British. And then I tried to get to Berlin, but I only got halfway there. And then after some more, after a summer of picking cherries, at my at my family's cherry farms, I tried to make myself my way again to Berlin by hopping freight cars. And that's when the Russians caught me. And then they kept me in the basement for a few days. And then they let me go again. So I eventually got to Berlin.
So they caught you on a freight train. What was their reasoning for?
No, they didn't catch me on the freight train. They caught me on the bridge going across the River Elbe,
Oh.
which I had to get across to get to Berlin. I
Right.
was on the other side. And as a matter of fact, what really happened there was we found a nice German guy who, I guess we must have had something that he wanted, that we traded. He knew how to get us where we wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
But he took the two of us and delivered us right into a Russian guard.
Oh no.
And he took us, and then they locked us up for a few days.
So it was you and a friend?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. The same guy I left the.
Windmill.
I was in the windmill.
Okay. You guys went through a lot together.
Yeah, yeah. We spent a lot of time. And interestingly enough, we separated at that point when we got out from under the Russians, and he wanted to go to a more southern city, Dresden,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to go to Berlin, so we split up there. We split right there, and I've never heard from him again. So
Wow.
I am almost certain that he didn't make it for some reason or another.
So then you got out from under the Russians, and then did you finally make it back to
Then
Berlin?
I made it back to Berlin. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And so were you able to reunite with your family?
Yeah, well, I went home.
Mm-hmm.
My mother had been evacuated to Czechoslovakia, and she managed to take my brother and my sister and a hand wagon full of belongings and came on foot from Czechoslovakia back to Berlin.
Okay. Wow. Let's see. This is fabulous. Let's see. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about the Holocaust and anything you know about that?
Okay.
Okay. So growing up, kind of backtracking to when you were growing up, were you ever around Jewish people, or did you feel any negative feelings or anti-Semitic feelings going on in society, or were you aware of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complex question because, of course, we were taught in school what horrible people the Jews were.
Mm-hmm.
And the prime, and of course they had movies always depicting the Jew as a moneylender, as unclean, as, being near criminal. But at home, of course, my mother had worked for a company that made medical equipment, and the company was owned by a Jew, whom she got along with. My pediatrician was a Jew. I was circumcised. So we had no direct contact when I grew up with any Jews. We didn't know any.
Mm-hmm.
But by that time, there were rumors as to what was being done. And when the really bad things happened, like in Warsaw, the German soldiers that were there knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came back. I mean, you know, they came home on leave and would tell.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the concentration camps are concerned and the details of it, I didn't find out about it any earlier than anybody else did after the war when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I have always contended, and do so today, the mass movement of Jews in cattle cars, and under the circumstances and the way it was done, had to be known by a hell of a lot of German people.
Right.
Because, I mean, you know, when you read about it, and those trains took priority. Even so, we were losing the war in Russia and needed every train car we could get our hands on to take ammunition up to the front. These cars had priority
Mm-hmm.
to take Jews to the camps. So it's a terrible thing, and it's one that it's really hard to find an excuse how it could have happened, because there were too many people involved that should have known better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a definite responsibility, people involved. But I saw a similar thing after, in the late, before the war came down in Berlin, which was, what, 1990, 89 or 90? The East German police were terribly arrogant people that we were afraid, even when we had permission to go into the eastern zone or be on the transit, the two transit autobahns, where you had to go through their controls, or wherever you came across them. You know, in Berlin, I mean, they manned the machine gun towers and shot at people trying to get across the wall. All those people couldn't remember a damn thing after the war fell. So the human mind is apparently able to do a lot of bad things,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when it is permitted by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid to say that same thing could happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad part about it. But to the extreme that it happened with the Jews is utterly ridiculous.
Okay.
And then along that line, you know, the people that I hold responsible, I mean, there were resistance groups in Germany, I mean, that did a lot of things, but they waited, in general, they waited too late. And there was nobody that had enough guts to pull a sidearm out and shoot the son of a bitch and be done with it.
Right.
Because, I mean, you know, he would have lost his life, but
Nobody had the guts to do it.
that Jewish question is a terrible question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. So you made it back to Berlin and you were reunited with your family. And at that point, what year was that? Do you remember what year that was? After?
Yeah, I made it back in I got back home in 1945.
Okay. And so at that point when you got home, were you thinking, well, I'm gonna
Well,
start over,
what
or-
happened now, when I got back in 1945, the Russians had taken Berlin
Mhm.
and it had been a horrendous experience. I mean, but when I got back, half of Berlin was now occupied by the British, the French, and the Americans.
Mhm.
And where we lived was in the American part of that occupied Berlin.
Mhm.
And of course, no jobs. Very little food. And it was a bad time and a terrible winter. One of the coldest winters we ever had in Berlin. Was 46 to 47. I mean, people froze to death. A lot of people just, you know, committed suicide, hung themselves, or drowned themselves in the lake near our house. We had no electricity. We had no water. We had no heat. Really bad.
Mhm.
And then, you know, it got a little normalized. The Americans took a school that was close to our house and made a hospital out of it, an American Army hospital. And so they needed places for the nurses, and the head nurse got our house.
They had to move out.
Oh.
And we lived in a little apartment with another family for 8 months or so.
Mhm.
And then we got back in the house. And
So during that time, did you work? Or during that time period, did you work?
yeah, I eventually started working for the Americans.
Okay.
And I did a variety of jobs. I was a motorboat driver for the yacht club. But American general enlightening for my boat unfortunately stepped into the lake.
Oh no.
And I was fired. So that job didn't last very long. But it was a nice job. I did a lot of wood cutting for with those big saws, 2 men big saws, doing pine trees. And then I got the dream job. I became a desk clerk for the American Hotel, the Transit Hotel. And as such, I had an American boss who was a Jew, who was interested in buying anything he could in Berlin. I had no interest in the hotel, so he really left me in charge of the place.
Wow.
And I had a good time. I was doing all my black marketing work in the hotel, and he was doing it outside of the hotel. And and then I tried to get back to college. I couldn't get. I still was trying to get to be a doctor, but I couldn't get into medical school. It was impossible. Then I tried to get into engineering school. Couldn't do that either. And finally, I got into. I studied business, and was about halfway through when there was a notice on the board that the following students cannot study any further till they deliver proof of a final high school diploma.
Oh.
And because I had one, but it was called a war diploma.
Oh.
And since the communists were big in Berlin at the time, they made sure that these war diplomas were not recognized. But I ended up being very, very fortunate. The professor that I studied law under was also the minister of education for Berlin. And he gave me an honorary degree, high school degree.
Wow.
So
That
you
was
got to
fortunate.
finish.
Very fortunate. So you finished school, and then at what point did you come to the United States?
Right after I got out of school.
Okay. And when you got here, what did you do? Where did you go?
Then I had trouble finding a job here because nobody would recognize my diploma. They were totally unfamiliar with any of it.
Right.
And there was still a lot of ill will over here from a lot of people, particularly anytime you ran into somebody that had been a bomber pilot and made it. Even though they dropped all those bombs on Germany and should have felt a little responsible for that.
Right.
They had all lost so many friends because we shut down so many of them that they always, those were the people that were hard to get along with.
Yeah.
So there was a German fellow, he had a company in Greensboro, the Arnold Stone Company. And he offered me a job as a shop clerk, $60, and I went to work.
Wow. So what year was that when you?
That was, well, we're now in 1953 or 54.
Okay. So you got a job in Greensboro.
Yeah, and I tried to show him how clever I was, but I don't think he appreciated it. So I went to work for Allstate Insurance Company, who had a management training program, and they moved me to Atlanta, to Charlotte, then to Atlanta. And then this fellow from Greensboro called me up one evening, and he said, "Why don't you come back?" And I said, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" He said, "Why don't you come back and be the president's assistant?" I said, "Well, why don't I be assistant president?" He said, "No." He said, "Let's be president's assistant." So I said, "All right." And I came back to Greensboro. And then he sold the business to Carolina Skier. And then I became the president of that business, and then eventually of Carolina Skier.
Okay. So, did you ever go back to Germany after that?
I used to go back regularly. I haven't been back in 3 years.
Okay.
3 years, right? Or was it 4?
3, maybe 4.
3 or 4. Up to then, I used to go every year, sometimes.
But his family comes over here every.
Yeah, they come now.
Oh,
See, they're younger.
okay.
So
Okay.
I used to go regularly,
Mhm.
and I had also had through business a few times reason to go to Europe,
Mhm.
and then I'd always make a personal trip out of it too.
Right. Wow.
I was doing pretty good till I met Isley.
Then it all went downhill.
Ever since.
I went down here.
Yeah. 30 years ago.
Has it been
We've
30
been married
years?
30 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, as far as what we talked about at the beginning with, students getting another perspective, this has been great. But is there like a lasting impression that you would want them to hear and leave them with?
On what now? On the war? Get back to that?
And just your experiences, and yes, the war, and just offering this different perspective is so valuable.
Well, I think maybe the only perspective, if it means anything, is really when we discussed what can happen in a country like Germany, because, see, as far as cultural achievements were concerned, we are, and particularly were, a great nation.
Mm-hmm.
You take music, philosophy, anything. We are also known to be a very detailed and systematic people, which may be part of our downfall. It's as advantageous as it is in everyday life to be thorough and detailed. Germany overdid it because we even kept detailed record of every Jew we murdered,
Mm-hmm.
of every prisoner we had. And well, we are still so detailed now that where my mother lives in Berlin, they started putting numbering each tree. And I was sort of making fun of that and wondering, and my brother said, well, Gert, if something is wrong with a tree and they need to take it down or take some limbs off, or it hangs over too far in the street or whatever reason, we never have any problems of
Okay.
orienting and locating the tree because it's number 51. Well, this is true.
Very detail oriented.
But
They are.
what I meant to, that's the one side. And then what makes me afraid is to see these people do things like they did with the Jews, that I'm afraid that given the right circumstances, it can happen anywhere.